Yes. Another announcement I almost forgot was Friday night will be our worship night here around the campfire, so come on out for that. It's going to be a blessing Friday from 7 to 9. And there's flyers up on this table up here if you need to be reminded of that. But it's a great time of worshiping the Lord outside under the stars along with the crickets. So, chapter 13, Leviticus, we've looked at already food and animals and even childbirth and just all the different clean and unclean things. Well, we continue to look now at something deeper. And this is the chapters 13, 14, and 15 really go hand in hand. I don't think we're going to cover quite all three chapters tonight. So I spared you one chapter, but chapters 13 and 14 are leprosy. And so let's look at chapter 13, Leviticus 13, verse 1. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, saying, when a man shall have in the skin of his flesh a rising, a scab, or a bright spot, and it be in the skin of his flesh like the plague of leprosy, then he shall be brought unto Aaron the priest, or unto one of Aaron's sons, the priests. And the priest shall look on the plague of the skin, in the skin of the flesh. And when the hair in the plague is turned white, and the plague in sight be deeper than the skin of his flesh, it is a plague of leprosy. And the priest shall look on him and pronounce him unclean. Now, if the bright spot be white in the skin of his flesh, and in the sight be in sight be not deeper than the skin, and the hair thereof is not turned white, then the priest shall shut up him that has the plague for 7 days. He'll be quarantined, kind of. And the priest shall look on him the seventh day, and behold, if the plague in his sight be at a stay, and the plague spread not in the skin, then the priest shall shut him up 7 more days. And the priest shall look on him again the seventh day, and behold, if the plague be somewhat dark, and the plague spread not in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. But it is but a scab, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the scab spread much abroad in the skin, after that he has been seen of the priest, for his cleansing he shall be seen of the priest again. And if the priest see that, behold, the scab spreads in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprosy. When the plague of leprosy is in a man, then he shall be brought unto the priest, and the priest shall see him. And behold, if the rising be white in the skin, and it have turned the hair white, and there be quick raw flesh in the rising, it is an old leprosy in the skin of his flesh, and the priest shall pronounce him unclean, and she shall not shut him up, for he is unclean. And if a leprosy break out abroad in the skin, and the leprosy cover all the skin of him that has the plague, from his head even unto his foot, wheresoever the priest looks, then the priest shall consider, and behold, if the leprosy have covered all his flesh, he shall pronounce him clean that has the plague. It is all turned white, he is clean. But when raw flesh appears in him, he shall be unclean. And the priest shall see the raw flesh, and pronounce him to be unclean. For the raw flesh is unclean, it is a leprosy. Or if the raw flesh turn again, and be changed unto white, he shall come unto the priest. And the priest shall see him, and behold the plague. If the plague be turned into white, then the priest shall pronounce him clean, that has the plague. He now is clean. The flesh also, in which even the skin thereof was a boil, and is healed. And in the place of the boil there was a white rising, or a bright spot, when white and somewhat reddish, and it be showed to the priest. And if, when the high priest sees it, behold, it be in sight lower than the skin, and the hair thereof be turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a plague of leprosy broken out of the boil. And but if the priest look on it, and behold, there be no white hairs therein, and if it be lower than the skin, but be somewhat dark, then the priest shall shut him up for 7 days. And if it spread much abroad in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a plague. But if the bright spot stay in his place and spread not, it is a burning boil, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. Or if there be any flesh in the skin, whereof there is a hot burning, and the quick flesh that burns have a white bright spot, somewhat reddish or white, then the priest shall look upon it, and behold, if the hair in the bright spot be turned white, and it be in sight deeper than the skin, it is a leprosy broken out of the burning, wherefore the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is the plague of leprosy. But if the priest look on it, and behold, there be no white hair in the bright spot, and it be lower than the other skin, but be somewhat dark, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days, and the priest shall look on him the 7th day, and if it be spread much abroad in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is the plague of leprosy. And if the bright spot stay in his place, and spread not in the skin, but it be somewhat dark, it is a rising of the burning, and the priest shall pronounce him clean, for it is an inflammation of the burning. So, that's a good chunk there, isn't it? All of these things, you might just note, who knows our body best? This body comes with an owner's manual. Do you know that? And somebody once called the Bible basic, B-I-B-L-E, basic instructions before leaving earth. And really it is just that. God knows exactly what's happening. Even when it comes to COVID, God knows exactly what's happening with our bodies, with us. In fact, long before anyone thought of 14 days, that should be a good time to quarantine. It's in the Bible. 7 days, okay? And then 7 more days. What does that equal? 14 days. The brightest and most intelligent minds of our day can't even touch, can't even hold a flame next to the God of the universe, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. Amen? He knows every detail, and that's what's amazing as you look at this skin disease, and even on the face. Look at verse 29. We'll continue. If a man or a woman have a plague upon the head or the beard, women, it's okay to have beards, apparently. Then the priest shall see the plague, and behold, if it be in sight deeper than the skin, and there be a yellow thin hair, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a dry scald, even a leprosy upon the head or the beard, or we would say the face. And if the priest look on the plague of the skull, and behold, it be not in sight deeper than the skin, and that there is no black hair in it, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days, because of the plague of the skull. And in the 7th day the priest will look on it, and behold, if the skull spread not, and there be in it no yellow hair, then the skull be not in sight deeper than the skin, he shall be shaven, but the skull shall he not shave. And the priest shall shut him up, that has the skull, 7 more days. And then the 7th day the priest shall look on the skull, and behold, excuse me, if the skull be not spread in the skin, nor be in sight deeper than the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean. But if the skull spread much in the skin after his cleansing, then the priest shall look on him, and behold, if the skull be spread in the skin, the priest shall not seek for yellow hair, he is unclean. But if the skull be in his sight at a stay, and there is black hair grown up therein also, the skull is healed. He is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. And if a man or a woman also have in the skin of their flesh bright spots, even white bright spots, then the priest shall look on, and behold, if the bright spots in the skin of their flesh be darkish white, it is a freckled spot that grows in the skin, he is clean. And the man whose hair is fallen off his head, he is bald, yet he is clean. Some guys are real happy about that verse. And he that has his hair fallen off from the part of his head toward his face, he is forehead bald. You didn't know that was a thing, did you? You could be forehead bald, yet he is clean. And there be in the bald head, or bald forehead, a white reddish sore. It is a leprosy. You can't miss that. Sprung up in his bald head, or his bald forehead. Then the priest shall look on him, and behold, if it is rising of the sore be white reddish in his bald head, or in his bald forehead. As the leprosy appears in the skin of the flesh, he is a leprous man. He is unclean. The priest shall pronounce him utterly unclean. His plague is in his head. And the leper in whom the plague is, his clothes shall be torn or rent, and his head bare. And he shall put a covering upon his upper lip, and shall cry, Unclean, unclean. All the days wherein the plague shall be in him, he shall be defiled. He is unclean. He shall dwell alone outside the camp, shall his habitation be. And the garment also that the plague of leprosy is in, whether it be wool or a woolen garment or a linen garment, whether it be warp or woof of linen or of woolen, whether it in a skin or in anything made of skin. And if the plague be greenish or reddish in the garment or in the skin, either in the warp or the woof, or in anything of the skin, it is a plague of leprosy, and shall be showed unto the priest. And the priest shall look upon the plague and shut it up that has the plague 7 days. Verse 51, and he shall look on the plague on the 7th day, if the plague spread in the garment, either in the warp or the woof, or in the skin, or in a skin, or in any work that is made of skin, the plague is a fretting leprosy. It is unclean. He shall therefore burn that garment, whether warp or woof, in woolen or in linen, or in anything of skin wherein the plague is, for it is a fretting leprosy. It shall be burnt in the fire. And if the priest shall look, and behold, the plague be not spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof, or in anything of skin, then the priest shall command that they wash the thing wherein the plague is, and he shall shut up 7 days more. The priest shall look on the plague after that it is washed, and behold, if the plague have not changed his color, and the plague be not spread, it is unclean, thou shalt burn it in the fire. It is fret inward, whether it be bare within or bare without. And if the priest look, and behold, the plague be somewhat dark after the washing of it, and then he shall rend it or tear it out of the garment, or out of the skin, or out of the warp, or out of the woof. And if it appears still in the garment, either in the warp or the woof, or in anything of skin, it is a spreading plague. Thou shalt burn that wherein the plague is with fire. And the garment, either warp or woof, or whatever thing of skin it be, which thou shalt wash, if the plague be departed from them, then it shall be washed the 2nd time, and shall be clean. This is the law of the plague of leprosy in the garments of woolen or linen, either in the warp or the woof, or anything of skins, to pronounce it clean, or to pronounce it unclean. So the warp and the woof, right? They used to make things out of dog hair, and it would be called woof. Just kidding. Sort of. But the title of the message gives you the secret. Why would this chapter ever be read in an open public place? Why would any pastor ever choose to read through this? Take away the K, as you're reading through chapter 13 especially. In what word? Skin. Take away the K. And it will teach you what this whole chapter is all about. It's not about skin. It's about sin. Uh-oh. It's the one thing that pastors don't like to talk about, because it's not popular. There are many things out there that are we could define as sin. No other thing, no other word for it. But it is sin. And leprosy is it's a very accurate picture of sin. What happened with leprosy is an incredible, accurate thing. And this is very powerful when you stop and hear it. Like sin, leprosy began underneath the surface of the skin, completely out of sight, unnoticeable. In fact, many would look, and if they had the disease of leprosy starting out, would think it's no big deal. Seemingly nothing to be concerned about. Sounds like our culture. Why should I be concerned with Leviticus 13? It's no big deal. I just heard you read it. It's nothing for me to be concerned about. But it starts out underneath the surface, out of sight, and then when it spreads insidiously. It spreads so severely across and throughout your body, eventually causing your bones to soften, and the fingernails start to disappear, and your teeth would actually recede into your gums. Eventually your nose falls off of your face, and you have this putrid, just disgusting, rank smell coming from your body. It is no wonder that these became colonies. No one wanted to be around anyone that had this disease, but people had it. It is not, by the way, Hansen's disease, which some have tried to say modern day leprosy could be called Hansen's disease. That is a very mild form of what in biblical days actually leprosy was, and what I just described. And like sin, it starts out so small. Just, it's not a big deal. This won't affect anyone. They're not hurting anyone. Two males that get married, they're not hurting anyone else. This, group of people that says it's okay to do whatever, you fill in the break. It's called sin. And it's a deadly disease that eventually brings what? The wages of sin is death. And that's what leprosy did. In fact, another way that it's very accurate is the first thing that leprosy did when you caught leprosy is it deadened your nerves. It made it so that you had no feeling. In fact, when a rat, if you were sleeping, a rat could just come right up and start nibbling on the ends of your fingers or your toes, and you wouldn't know it because you had this disease. In the morning, it would be half of your little limbs, kind of just nubs there, exposed. A lot like sin. You start to be okay watching some TV show, watching some entertainment, whatever it is, you start to accept it. Eventually, you're no longer affected by it. It's just a stripper pole. What's the big deal? You start to get totally desensitized to that which, when you were maybe 6 and 8 years old, if you've been raised in the church, it would appall you. It would just be totally overwhelming that anyone would ever do that. And so, that's, again, another way that leprosy is such an accurate picture of sin. Take away the K, and you have the whole issue in chapter 13 and what it means. Let's read 14, otherwise we won't. Because this goes right along with it. And one thing about chapter 13, we could say, is the diagnosis. It is no cure. Leviticus 13 has no cure for leprosy. It is simply instructions on how the high priest was to keep it from spreading. And so, chapter 14 now is going to be, if there be a cure, and one is cleansed. This is the law for the cleansing. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, This shall be the law of the leper in the day of his cleansing. He shall be brought unto the priest, and the priest shall go forth out of the camp. And the priest shall look, and behold, if the plague of leprosy be healed in the leper, then shall the priest command to take for him that is to be cleansed 2 birds, alive and clean, and cedar wood, and scarlet, and hyssop. And the priest shall command that one of the birds be killed in an earthen vessel over running water. As for the living bird, he shall take it and the cedar wood and the scarlet and the hyssop, and shall dip them in the living bird in the blood of the bird that was killed over the running water. And he shall sprinkle upon him that is to be cleansed from the leprosy 7 times, and shall pronounce him clean now. And shall let the living bird loose in the open field. Speaking, birds, really, letting the bird go speaks of freedom, of liberty. And so that's all that really is signifying. And he that is to be cleansed, verse 8, shall wash his clothes and shave off all his hair. I just did that recently. And wash himself in water, that he may be clean. And after that he shall come into the camp, and shall tarry abroad out of his tent 7 days. But it shall be on the 7th day that he shall shave off all his hair off his head, and his beard, and his eyebrows. I didn't see that one. I missed that in this verse. I still kept my eyebrows. I'm such a terrible. Anyway, even all his hair he shall shave off. And he shall wash his clothes. Also he shall wash his flesh in water, and he shall be clean. And on the 8th day he shall take 2 lambs, he lambs without blemish, and 1 ewe lamb of the first year without blemish, and 3/10 deals of fine flour for a meal offering, mingled with oil, and 1 log of oil. And the priest that makes him clean shall present the man that is to be made clean, and those things before the Lord at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And the priest shall take one he lamb and offer him for a trespass offering, and the log of oil, and wave them for a wave offering before the Lord. And he shall slay the lamb, kill the lamb, in place where he shall kill the sin offering and the burnt offering in the holy place. As as the sin offering is the priest, so is the trespass offering. It is most holy. And the priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering, and the priest shall put it upon the tip of the right ear of him that is to be cleansed, the leprous man that is now clean, and upon the thumb of his right hand, and upon the great toe or the big toe of his right foot. And the priest shall take some of the log of the oil and pour it into the palm of his own left hand, and the priest shall dip his right finger in the oil that is in his left hand, and shall sprinkle of the oil with his finger 7 times before the Lord. And the rest of the oil that is in his hand shall be the priest put upon the tip of the right ear of him that is to be cleansed, upon the thumb of his right hand, and upon the great toe of his right foot, upon the blood of the trespass offering. And the remnant of the oil that is in the priest's hand shall pour upon the head of him that is to be cleansed. And the priest shall make an atonement for him before the Lord. And the priest shall offer the sin offering, and make an atonement for him that is to be cleansed from his uncleanness. And afterward he shall kill the burnt offering. And the priest shall offer the burnt offering and the meal offering upon the altar, and the priest shall make an atonement for him, and he shall be clean. Now, if he be poor and cannot get so much, then he shall take 1 lamb for a trespass offering, to be waved, to make an atonement for him, and 1/10 deal of fine flour mingled with oil for a meal offering, and a log of oil, and 2 turtle doves and 2 pigeons, young pigeons, such as he is able to get. And the one shall be a sin offering, and the other a burnt offering. And he shall bring them on the 8th day for his cleansing unto the priest, and to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation before the Lord. And the priest shall take the the priest shall take the lamb of the trespass offering, and the log of oil, and the priest shall wave them before the Lord. And he shall kill the lamb of the trespass offering, and the priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering, and put it upon the tip of the right ear of him that is to be cleansed, upon the thumb of his right hand, and upon the great toe of his right foot. And the priest shall pour of the oil into the palm of his own left hand, and the priest shall sprinkle it with his right finger, some of the oil that is in his left hand, 7 times before the Lord. And the priest shall put of the oil that is in the hand of him upon the tip of his right ear, upon of him that is to be clean, and upon the thumb of his right hand, and upon the great toe of his right foot, upon the place of the blood of the trespass offering. And the rest of the oil that is in the priest's hand he shall put upon the head of him that is to be cleansed, to make an atonement for him before the Lord. And he shall offer the one of the turtle doves or of the young pigeons, such as he can get, whatever he's able to get, even such as he is able to get, the one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering, with a meal offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for him that is to be cleansed before the Lord. This is the law of him in whom is the plague of leprosy, whose hand is not able to get that which pertains to his cleansing. And the Lord spake again unto Moses and Aaron, when you come into the land of Canaan, which I give to you for your possession, and I put the plague of leprosy in a house or in the land of your possession. And he that owns the house shall come and tell the priest, saying, it seems to me there is as it were a plague in the house. Then the priest shall come, command that they empty the house before the priest goes in to it to see the plague, that all that is in the house be not made unclean. And afterward the priest shall go in to see the house, and he shall look on the plague, and behold, if the plague be in the walls of the house, with hollow strakes, greenish or reddish, which in sight are lower than the wall, then the priest shall go out of the house to the door of the house, and shut up the house 7 days. And the priest shall come again the 7th day, and look, and behold, if the plague be spread in the walls of the house, then the priest shall command that they take away the stones in which the plague is, and they shall cast them into an unclean place outside the city. Verse 41, and he shall cause the house to be scraped within round about, and they shall pour out of the dust that they scrape off without the city into an unclean place. And they shall take other stones and put them in the place of those stones. And he shall take other mortar and shall plaster the house. And if the plague come again and break out in their house, after that he has taken away the stones and has scraped the house, and after it is plastered, then the priest shall come and look, and behold, if the plague be spread in the house, when it is a fretting leprosy in the house, it is unclean. And he shall break down the house, the stones of it, and the timber thereof, and all the mortar of the house, and he shall carry them forth out of the city into an unclean place. Moreover, he that goes into the house all the while that it is shut up shall be unclean until the evening. And he that lies in the house shall wash his clothes, and he that eats in his house, in that house, shall wash his clothes. And if the priest shall come in and look upon it, and behold, the plague has not spread in the house after the house was plastered, and the priest shall pronounce it the house clean, because the plague is healed. And he shall take to cleanse the house 2 birds, and cedar wood, and scarlet, and hyssop. And he shall kill the one of the birds in an earthen vessel over running water, and he shall take the cedar wood, and the hyssop, and the scarlet, and the living bird, and dip them in the blood of the slain bird, and in the running water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. And he shall cleanse the house with the blood of the bird, and with running water, and with the living bird, and with the cedar wood, and with the hyssop, and with the scarlet. But he shall let go the living bird out of the city into the open fields, and make an atonement for the house, and it shall be clean. This is the law for all manner of plague of leprosy and scald, and for the leprosy of a garment, and if a leprosy was inside of a house, and for a rising, or for a scab, or for a bright spot, to teach when it is unclean and when it is clean. This is the law of leprosy. The point of leprosy is that we would know what is clean and what is unclean. The point of sin. The whole reason that we believe and the Bible teaches about sin is that we would know what is unclean and what is clean. In fact, the theme of the book of Leviticus, maybe this is the first time you've ever read the book of Leviticus. What's it all about? It's about being holy. It's understanding what it means when it says most holy to the Lord. And note at the very beginning of chapter 13, we started at chapter 13, didn't we? At verse 2, if a man has the skin of his flesh is rising, a scab, or a bright spot. And then at the very last verse that we just read, well, not the very last, but verse 56 of chapter 14 now. And for a rising, and for a scab, and for a bright spot. Those 3 things have something to teach us about sin. And it helps in 13 verse 1 or 2. Yeah, in Leviticus 13:2. It's, what is sin? What is it that describes sin, and how does sin begin? It's the rising of the flesh. It's right there. The flesh starts rising. In fact, the original sin. You thought it was in the Garden of Eden? It was actually up in heaven. Satan got a good case of the I wills. In fact, there are 5 of them in Isaiah 14, where he says, I will do this, I will do that. Not much different than me, than you, by the way. This is what sin does. This is what describes sin. I, the middle letter of sin, right? In fact, it's pride. That's what the rising of flesh is. The middle letter of pride, too. I will do what I want. I will think and believe what I think and believe is right. Pride will keep you from the truth. I will do whatever I want. You know, Lucifer had the same problem in Isaiah 14. I will do what I think is right. I'm going to do what I know is best. It's pride. We've been talking on Thursday nights, looking at Corinthians, and God gives grace to the humble. And before it says, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. There's a contrast that we should see there. You are either all about you and what you want and your stuff and your ways, or you're humble. God resists the proud. It's hard to get close to God when you're already set in your stubborn, rigid ways. But, in fact, the only story that we have concerning leprosy, other than right here, is in, I wrote it down, hold on, 2 Kings 5. And in 2 Kings chapter 5, you have this interesting story of this leader that's smitten with leprosy. And Elisha, the prophet, God uses to heal this guy, Naaman, the Syrian leader. But he was prominent, we would say prideful. And you can hear it. He sends word for Elisha, and Elisha doesn't even come. He gets ticked off. And then even Elisha's commands, what Elisha tells him to do. He says, I'm too good for that, in my translation. But and what God was dealing with Naaman in 2 Kings 5 about was this issue of the rising of the flesh, pride. The raising of the skin, on the skin. You would see it. Man, that flesh is really rising above all the others. Nebuchadnezzar was rising. You want an accurate picture of the flesh. It led him to animalistic. He became a beast. So the rising of the flesh, that's an accurate picture. It's an accurate diagnosis of sin. And I have that diagnosis, by the way. Sonoma County is a leper colony. I don't know if you knew that. Unless you say, oh, there's good people out there. There's good in me. There's good. It's not what the Bible teaches. In fact, when someone came to Jesus and called him good, what was it that Jesus said? Why do you call me good? Only one is good. We've all heard that question, right? Why do bad things happen to good people? The greatest answer to that question, why do bad things happen to good people? It only happened once in all of history, and he volunteered when Jesus Christ died on the cross. Other than that, there are no good people. We're all sinners. Somebody at one time said that Hitler was such a cute little chubby baby. Somebody at one time said, you fill in the blank of the most hideous, heinous criminal, rapist, whatever it might be. Guy that's just mass murderer at one time was a cute, cuddly, chubby little baby. It's one reason I can look at my little 15-month-old and say, you're a dirty, filthy, disgusting... Well, it's pretty easy to say that when he's been out in the... But you are a sinner. You need to be saved, son. Don't ever let anyone tell you you don't. That you've done what you need to do to be clean. Have you done what Leviticus 13 and 14 talk about? This is what's so fascinating. All of these things were written down and they were never used. Because nobody ever was cleansed of leprosy until Jesus Christ comes on the scene. And what does he do when he finally does the unthinkable, and that's touches someone that has leprosy, goes near somebody that has the most contagious and deadliest disease known to man? Jesus went and touched them, and he didn't say, go and tell everybody. Make sure everyone knows. No, he told the guy, go to the priest. Because Jesus knows, he's the writer of the Bible. He knows these instructions, and it would blow those priests away. That's what, now we have to go find a young turtle dove, and we got to dip the hyssop, we got to do this and that and the other. Somebody said, you've all heard those famous people, those musicians that have these contracts, and they get everything they need. Their booking agent has to set up a hotel room that's exactly what they asked for. They asked for a 5-gallon bowl full of M&Ms, and all the red ones are taken out. This chapter 13 and 14, is a lot like that. I want to know the integrity of my people, God is saying. These were never even to be used. It's like, why? Why all these instructions? Why all this detail? Because my son, I'm going to be sending Jesus Christ, my son, into the world to heal lepers. So actually, these 2 chapters become pretty fascinating when you understand who Jesus was. It's not boring when you understand who Jesus is. And you see the rising of the flesh. Yes, that's sin. What's the scab all about? The scab covers over that which should be dealt with. If you need surgery, a scab will cover over the area that should be cut into and dealt with. You know why people drink loads and loads of alcohol? They're scabbing. They're putting a bandage over something that needs to be dealt with, like a scab, right? You see how accurate God's word is, how accurate the rising of the flesh, the scab is just like sin, covering over that which, and just kind of numbing the pain of that which should be ultimately dealt with. You know that Jesus Christ is all you need? You don't need pills. You don't need this, that, or the other. You don't need all of the stuff that the world tells you need. Our country is leaders. We lead in all of the world. We are good at this. We spend money we don't have for things we don't need to impress people we don't either know or like. I'll say that again, because we do lead in the world in this area. We spend money we don't have for things we do not need to impress people we don't know, and frankly we probably won't even get along with. That's us. Trying to scab over, trying to numb the pain, trying to fulfill the desire that's within every human being. What is that desire? An eternal void. And the greatest, video game console, it'll do it for maybe a couple years. It'll fulfill that eternal void within you. But it gets old, just like everything else. It dries up. In fact, the greatest marriage in the world, it'll kind of fulfill, it'll maybe even make it to 40 years, 50 years. But eventually, you know what? If that marriage is everything to you, if that's what you're saying, that's going to fulfill me, that's going to bring me total satisfaction, it will fail. It will fail. It's not going to bring satisfaction. All of us are craving something more. What about the bright spot? Because that's also mentioned, isn't it? The bright spot. This one's interesting to me. Because we do this. We say, I've worked really hard, I've been a good boy. I deserve to go see Circus Olay. It's just a bright, bright spot. I deserve to go and see that show. I know it's kind of filthy, but it's bright spot of my night, of my week. And I've been working real hard. I deserve a night off. You deserve a break today. And we do. We'll say that sin, we'll call it a bright spot. I look forward to when that show comes on. That's kind of my bright spot of the week, is when I get to sit down and have my ice cream or my popcorn, and I'm there watching my bright spot. And we think, this isn't a big deal. I'm not hurting anyone. It's not doing... Hey, it's sin. I'm preaching to myself, people. Don't think that I'm excluded, that I'm up here saying I am not full of sin. Because I will be the first to say I had leprosy, but I've been cleansed. I'm in the process of being cleansed. What do you do when leprosy is all around you? What do you do when sin is all around you? How can you get away? How could you be... In fact, the psalmist had that question. Psalm 119, verse 9. You all should know this verse. Psalm 119, verse 9. David, the writer. Talk about someone who knows something about sin. Psalm 119, verse 9 says, "Wherewithal shall a young man cleanse his ways?" How can I be clean, Lord? How could anyone be clean? By taking heed, that is listening, that is actually applying your ear to the Word of God, and not the word of people around you, but the Word of God. You know that there are well-meaning Christians that are full of words. Their idea of what this might be, dating advice. I'll give you some advice for that. Or parenting tips. I'll give you some tips on that. There are well-meaning Christian brothers and sisters in the Lord that truly think they're being used. You know what? Make sure you tell them, take heed to the Word of God. I'm glad that that's worked for you for the past 50 years, 20 years, 40 years, but where in the Bible, that whole spiel that you just gave me, whatever it is, because there's many out there that'll give you advice and think they have the answers in life. Take heed, or you end up filthy. You end up spreading. It ends up spreading throughout the whole camp, throughout the family, throughout the church. It spreads. If it is not dealt with, it spreads. Again, as you go through these things, as you look at leprosy, as you look at the cleansing, what does that do for your worship of Jesus Christ? It should enrich it. It should cause us to see, wow, He came to me. Note that the priest had to go forth. The priest went to the leper. Now it was after the leper came, because there was a sore, there was a rising of the flesh, all of that stuff. But the priest would go forth and see if the leper was healed, if the leper had been cleansed. Jesus Christ came and He saw that we needed to be cleansed. But He came to me. He came to us. God stepped down. And I hope you know that all of this in Leviticus, all of the priesthood, we just got, when we got done with Exodus, I hope it hit home. I hope it became clear. There is no other priests. It is Jesus Christ and Him alone. Anyone who claims to be a higher priest, as many will, many do, that's borderline blasphemy. Because Hebrews, read the book of Hebrews sometimes, you find out we have a great high priest who's called not only the high priest, he's called the chief priest, he's called the shepherd, the great high priest, chief priests, the one that came to truly examine us and put us under the microscope, if you will, and looked at us. In fact, again, 2 Corinthians chapter 13, we looked at this on Thursday night. Examine yourselves to see if you are in the faith. In other words, what happened to you when you were a baby doesn't matter. What happened to you last week in some religious group doesn't matter. Examine for yourselves and see if you be in the faith. Because every day is a living and new day with Jesus Christ. That's why it's not dead. That's why I hope, we're not falling over. We're not the frozen chosen, I hope. And you go to some churches, they're big, they're fancy, everyone's dressed to the nines, and it's frozen. They are frozen solid. You cannot get through. There is no feeling, no life, no emotion. And Jesus, the book of Revelation tells us, Revelation chapters 2 and 3, the most important chapters for the church, any church. Revelation 2 and 3, Jesus is on the outside of that church. If anyone will hear my voice and open up, let me come in. Because you're dead. You're full of leprosy. You're blind. That's the song that we sang. I was lost, O Lord, but you found me. I was blind, but you made me see. I was worthless, but he bought me. Truly, truly, our eyes should be on him, on Jesus Christ, and no one else. No other priest, no other religious group, no other denomination, no other set of rules. It's all right here. The things that you hear, we read that a lot, didn't we? They put the blood upon the right ear. By the way, only 3 groups of people were ever anointed with oil in the scriptures. Kings, leaders of the people, were anointed with oil, right? Priests, we saw. Kings, priests also were anointed with oil. And prophets would come along and be anointed with oil. Here we have an incredible scene and a glimpse into the Christian. The leprosy. The person that had leprosy becomes a 4th person in that group. Kings, priests, and prophets. By the way, Jesus Christ fulfills every single one of those perfectly. No other person did. And if they tried, they were smitten. They were struck dead. If they ever were a king and they tried to go into the role of high priest, or if a high priest would try to go into the role of a king, or if a prophet tried to go into a role of either one, they would be struck dead. Why? Because there can only be one. Jesus Christ. The only one. And here, especially in chapter 14 as we read, we see that you, me, as a leprous person, would be anointed in the same way. Putting the blood on our right ear. Putting the blood on the tip of our thumb and on the big toe of our right foot. What does that speak of? Oh, be careful, little ears, what you hear. Be careful, little hands, what you do. Be careful, little feet, where you go. It speaks of how I listen. What I'm listening to. Is it garbage? Is every other word cursing? Whatever it is. Could you ever see it as holy? What am I handling? What's in your hand? Is it a staff? Throw it down. It might become a snake. No. What's in your hand? Is it holy? Can it be used for good? And finally, where are you going? Is it anointed? Is there a separated walk, as we talked about last week? Is there a distinction made between that which is right and that which is wrong? Or are you just a part of the culture today where it doesn't really matter, we're non-binary? We just don't identify as either. No, there is right and there is wrong. There is distinction that needs to be made. There is no neutral ground. And Jesus said it best when he said, if you are not for me, you're against me. And many try to say, well, I don't really know what I think about Jesus. Then you're against him. Well, that's harsh. Don't judge me. It's part of his credentials. It's part of his stipulations. You cannot, if you cannot bear the cross, we sang earlier, you can't wear the crown. It just won't happen. We got one shot at this. It's called life. We have one shot. Live it holy. Make the best of it. Be holy and you will become holy. W-H-O-L-L-Y. When you start to live holy, you begin to be whole. Live sinful and think that you're not affecting anyone else. Guess what happens? You start to infect others because of your sinful lifestyle. Note carefully that last bit of chapter 14. Even the houses we go to, even the houses that we spend time in, matters to God. What's going on? If those walls could speak, right? It doesn't matter. I'm not a pastor. I'm not even a Christian. We might argue. It does matter to God. Let it be separated. I don't mean call some professional priest that calls himself a professional to come and douse it with oil. That's meaningless. That's all external. If you're going to do that, you might as well get a goat and slaughter it, because you're using the same logic. It's the same sections of Scripture that you're talking about. No, if it's not that, then what is it? It's what are you allowing in that home? In those walls? What does go on behind closed doors? It matters to God. Every detail matters to God. Why? Because he's bossy? Why? Because he's a glory hog? Quite frankly, yeah. But it only belongs to him. Did you make everything? As God told Job that day, where were you when I framed the foundations of the earth? When I set a border so that the sea would only come up? The shores. Ever go out to the beach and you wonder why the shore stops? Why does it stop? Maybe you've ever wondered, why doesn't it just come all the way into Sebastopol, all the way in? Why doesn't the shore start to come all the way up? That has all been designed. God set those limits in place from the beginning. And he would say, where were you? Where were you in ancient times? Father, we thank you so much for your word today. God, how powerful, how rich your word truly is. Lord, as we look at leprosy and see the type of sin that it can be, we see the danger, Lord. What we allow